off the rust here. I'm pushing us to live to YouTube now.
Oh, yeah, thanks, Eric.
All right. I can email Jay and ask him to upload the full recording later. People want to see us approve the minutes. Oh.
Yeah, Adam accepted. Didn't get anything from Tom. And then we have a new member, Howard Rose, who I forwarded it to, but I didn't hear back from him. Tim, and Howard's your neighbor, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm gonna ping him right now. I don't know, did he go down to the clerk's office and swear himself in?
I think he shows up on email as part of advisory. So I think he's, I don't know. I don't think that they do that until after he's been sworn in, but.
All right. See if he gets back to me.
Yeah. Okay. Why don't we do go to the I'll do the update on NERI and reserve fund requests. Well, I don't want to do committee reorganization if we can get some more people to vote on it. So the NERI building subcommittee, not a whole lot of update besides that obviously the warrant article passed. I think next steps is more in MSBA. I believe Superintendent Martineau is sending a message to MSBA to tell them, that went through, and we're looking forward to the next steps. But I think it's in their court. I think it probably nothing will happen on that till June, July timeframe. And then let me pull up the reserve fund latest request list. So this year we're doing much better on the reserve fund than we have in prior years. We did approve that replacement boat already this year. Left so far is I think we're going to be a little bit over in our minute taker. Board of Health printer, I don't think we'll likely need that because there should be money in that budget, but it technically is there because we had budgeted a little bit extra to pay for that. But I don't think we'll need that. We had some town clerk early voting overages. We had a little bit increase in electricity cost. I think we can try to find out more on that, but 10,000 is worst case, might be 5,000. We have the lieutenant promotion, but I believe Chief Achilles thinks he might be able to absorb that into his budget. I think in the gas, I think Karen said she hopefully can absorb that into her budget. So right now it's at 0, but we'll have to see if by the time we finalize the end of the year, whether or not there's anything there. Board of Health, good news there is they were able to apply for a lot of the costs, even for the second half of the year against FEMA, even though we couldn't use CARES anymore. So we had backstopped, I think it was 94,000 or something like that. And right now, hopefully it's only about 2,000. And then there's a little bit of a premium increase in the liability insurance. So all in all, I mean, Tim, that's probably the lowest I've seen our balance in the reserve fund in a while.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of these are probably going to fall off. So we might end up spending, $30,000 of our reserve fund, which would be a good year.
Just to give you a quick update, Howard got his letter yesterday. He has not had a chance to get sworn in, so he won't be joining us until he does that.
No worries. Thanks for the update. Any questions on the reserve fund? Okay. We'll probably set a meeting. We can talk about it more when we get to the agenda item for the calendar. Usually I think I'm targeting the July 13th, the second Wednesday of July. That's when we usually have the year-end wrap-up article, to see if there's any reserve fund or interdepartmental transfers that we need to do. We have till the 15th of July to approve them for the fire fiscal year. So we'll double check what's remaining there, and we'll hold off on voting on these until that time. Okay. All right, so I think we're going to get everyone we're going to get. So in terms of committee reorganization, so our committee now has a chair, vice chair, and a secretary. In terms of chair, I'm happy to step into Kathy's shoes, which I think, we can all take this opportunity to thank Kathy again for many, many years of service on advisory. She did a tremendous job, and, certainly taught me a lot, and I know it taught everybody, but I also wanted to open it up and to see if anybody else wanted to throw their hat in the ring for that position.
No.
All you, Andrew.
No
Okay.
one, no one better.
Perfect.
We have an opportunity to create a tradition. If we feel it's appropriate, and this might be a good idea or a bad idea. It's the idea I've had in my head is that, being the chair of the advisory committee is not an easy thing. It may be an idea that we slide the vice chair into the chair slot, as not a requirement, but a tradition moving forward.
Yep. And I'd also consider almost like a term limit. I think it's certainly a position that I'm not for somebody being the chair of a committee for a very long period of time. So maybe revisit this in a year, 2 year, 3 years, but I certainly wouldn't want to be on or in that position for any longer than that. I think it should turn over frequently. But is there a motion?
So moved. I move that Andrew Pfaff be named chair of the advisory committee.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Adam. Adam?
Aye.
Marcy?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
And I will abstain. All right. Vice chair, again, we'll open it up to the floor to anybody that has interest.
Andrew, can you describe the
The role?
stations and the role? Yeah. And the time.
Yeah,
commitment?
so I was vice chair, and it really is mostly a designation to know who could take over for the chair in their absence. Somebody that could step in, when Kathy was late to a meeting, I could open it up and, so to get the ball rolling, it just makes it easier for continuity. Besides that, there's not really any other official duties besides just kind of usually the vice chair is somebody that has the desire and experience to kind of know and run a meeting. But besides that, there's nothing else. Tim, any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. There could be, the vice chair should at least digitally shadow the chair in terms of the process of setting the agenda, setting up the emails with the department heads. There's a lot of communications that happen. There's at least one meeting that happens outside of this. Just having a second person, not necessarily doing it, but aware and in the know would be very helpful in the event that Andrew cannot attend a meeting.
Yeah, Kathy was pretty good about CCing me on some emails just so I was in the loop, but yeah.
So I would start and say I'm interested if no one else is, and I'm certainly willing to support anyone who is. Tim, I know you've had many years experience, so I don't want to volunteer ahead of you, of course, but
I appreciate
otherwise,
that, but I am not
Okay.
putting my hat in the ring. Thank you.
All right. So I think I'm happy to do whatever is most supportive for the whole committee.
So I think I feel pretty similarly, Marcy. where I'd be very happy to fill the role if I can do it effectively. My Zoom's crap now. I think that might be, do you guys, my back?
Yep, you're good.
So I feel I'd be interested in the role in terms of if I can help add bandwidth or support to what Andrew's doing and the team as a whole. But ultimately, I just want us to move forward. So similar, I feel the same way, Marcy. I'm like, I'd be happy to see you take the role as well. So I'm not sure where that leaves us, but similarly happy to volunteer and be a part of it. But not making a stump speaking, I guess.
I'm gonna pass.
I'll tell you what, I'll do this. Marcy, I think if it's something you're interested in, I'm happy to take a step back, and very excited to have you in the role, and looking forward to supporting everybody.
Well, Eric, there is one more position to fill, and that is secretary,
Right.
which I think you're kind of doing now is sort of just starting the meetings. But other than that, that's just pretty much the extent of it. So, all right, I'll entertain a motion.
I move that Marcy Jones be nominated as vice chair of the advisory committee.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. Adam,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
Eric,
Hi.
Marcy,
Abstain.
and Andrew is aye. All right, and the
Thank
last
you.
position is secretary, and I nominate Eric.
I second.
Second.
Eric, would you be willing to serve in that capacity?
I'm very happy to continue to orchestrate our Zoom meetings.
Thank you. I have a motion to nominate Eric Fernandez as Secretary of Advisory Committee.
So move.
Second.
Second.
Roll call vote. Adam,
Aye.
Tim,
Aye.
Marcy,
Aye.
Eric,
Dane.
and Andrew's aye. Excellent. So that's the largest item on our on our agenda for tonight. I thought, okay, so now let's go to just overall town meeting discussion. I was interested to get everybody's thoughts in terms of how the meeting went. I mean, certainly some things. I thought it was a very interesting meeting. I thought there were certainly some topics that people really debated and really felt strongly about that I didn't think were going to be that debated. Namely, the Northborough Road. I thought that was certainly an interesting piece and something that I think we can talk about further in subsequent meetings in terms of what we think about a project of that size or how that would go forward. But I thought that was certainly the one that stuck out to me. And then I thought the Neary committee or Neary school feasibility study went through a little bit faster and easier than I thought it was going to. But I think that was a good, there's certainly a lot of work people did on discussing that and hammering that out. But anybody else thoughts?
Yeah, I think one thing I would say, which I'll only speak for myself on, is I felt like there were certain articles that there was a lot more debate on, in addition to the ones that you mentioned, Andrew, that I think maybe I didn't do enough due diligence personally on, that it felt like maybe we can think about a process in the future where we really hold ourselves accountable to try to see both sides of it before we take a vote. I'm definitely inexperienced on this board, but I don't know if it was groupthink or just inexperience or not being educated on all the issues. But for example, like the scenic roads was one that I felt like I probably made a lot of assumptions in our own conversation. And so I was kind of reflecting on the way that we take a vote on some of those things, and maybe we should force ourselves to have a devil's advocate in the group or something of that nature.
Well, that's the scenic road devil. But yeah, it's a tricky one, right? That's certainly a tough concept to
that was just one example. I felt like there were other ones where I just maybe jumped to a conclusion too early.
Anybody else?
I think part of it is just context, right? Just the longer you're around, the more you'll know. Right.
Yep. And I think the
Nah.
devil's advocate also, the more you're on advisory, the more people realize you're on advisory, and you'll be going someplace. I'm sure this happens to Tim. It happens to me. Is somebody will say, "Hey, on this thing, what do you think about this?" Or "I feel about that," and you start to hear more through the grapevine, and it kind of helps educate you on the different feelings of the town. So,
Yeah, the best thing you can do is go to the transfer station on Saturday and find a fellow named Sam Stivers, who's always there.
yep.
Who's also in our audience right now.
Or I might add, follow the lead of Sam Stivers and attend a lot of the meetings,
Right.
because you definitely get a sense of it. It takes a lot of time though. So but I think that was helpful for me, is sort of investing the time beforehand, listening to other groups talk about certain things. And I agree with you, Adam. In some ways it was, the results were not what we anticipated on advisory for sure, but in some ways not surprising if you heard a lot of other meetings. So anyway, that was my only takeaway too.
Yeah, and Marcy, that reminded me of a thought I had about maybe trying to create advisory, I don't want to call them liaisons, but kind of people that follow the other meetings. Like, you don't have to go to the meetings, but somebody that, Marcy, can you help fill us in on what's going on with historical, and maybe it's like a rolling, update on what's going on with the other committees, and have somebody that watches certain ones and then kind of just understands the nitty gritty of it and how it might impact advisory.
I think it's a great idea, and certainly would be happy to help with that.
So I'll put that on the agenda for a future topic. See if people that already watch other meetings can kind of be the ones that kind of report back on what's going on and how it might affect this committee, or what we might want to know about.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Eric, go ahead.
No, go for it, Tim.
That was just a quick question. Andrew, will you be joining the meetings that Kathy used to be attending?
The budget
morning-
ones?
The morning meeting?
Yeah, I think that's mostly for budget season.
Okay.
But yeah, I think we're going to have one kind of wrap up finance one next week or the week after. Can't remember where. I have to look at my calendar with Brian and them. So yeah, I'm taking over kind of that piece for now.
I was just going to say that I agree with the comment, Andrew, Marcy, regarding staying a bit closer, or having people be able to provide maybe a little bit more detail from some of these other committees. And I think one of my takeaways, which Adam is partially rooted in some of what you expressed, and being a little bit newer, and also, not having, I tried to listen to some of the select board and some of the other meetings, but I certainly don't attend nearly as many as some other folks in this group. But I do have I did walk away from this past year with a feeling that our process is very jammed into a very short period of time, and that what we're able to do essentially is review and challenge a little bit, which I think is a big part of what we're supposed to do, and understand the budget, right, and what's flowing into it. But I feel like there's potentially a missed opportunity to have more of an opportunity for that oversight or leadership, right, especially with key departments where there's either a lot of spending, there's controversy, there's need for better support, where we can actually bring some outside bandwidth and perspective. And then maybe more, of a strategic look, and starting off the summer and saying, let's revisit like where we got to with your budget, but also as you look forward to 5 years, what are some of your concerns? What are things you'd like? Where, have you found areas of inefficiency that you haven't been able to spend time on? It's going to look different for every department, but I just feel like, as much as I'm not trying to meet every week over the summer, I do feel like if we accordion out to some extent a little bit, maybe with select departments or specific topics that are key to us or we think are important, I think we might be able to achieve more and do more in terms of actually providing solutions versus challenging a little bit and being able to present accurately what's going on. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's just sort of a feeling I was left with after the past year.
It does. And the town does have a finance planning committee. I think it's our town administrator, a couple other people. and advisory is not part of it. And this is a committee that meets to discuss and set fiscal policy for the upcoming year. And it's a question I think I posed a year ago or so, and we didn't dwell on it. But I think, Eric, maybe we should.
Yep. I think, Tim, that's a perfect kind of part that we can add to our deep dive. And if I don't know if people have caught the last CPC meeting, but I would watch the beginning of it. They brought in the people that manage the town's investments. And I learned things that I didn't realize, that our, CPA funds are invested, 80-20, I think it is, equities, bonds. And we made, I don't know, a couple $100,000 of interest last year with the market, and how are we doing our investment strategy? And, I think certainly that's something that, advisory should just start to dig into and understand some of those financial policies and investment strategies and so on and so forth. The other part around town meeting, I think that, and I don't know if you all have gotten the same feedback. I think the weeknights, we had switched to Saturdays. I think a lot of people that I know that have kids really thought it was hard 2 nights in a row. And we had to get a babysitter, and the second night we didn't, my wife wasn't able to go. So I think, we're trying to push, and Paul's listening to back to Saturdays with hopefully some kind of kids program during the town meeting. I think would help get, some more people in the room. I mean, would we have 199 people voting on the articles? It's, let's try to work on. So I think, pushing towards that. I also think the clicker idea that Mr. Haggerty had would have come in handy for some of the votes that we had. So I think, certainly seeing how that progresses in terms of how we handle town meeting in the future would be good. And Paul, if you have any other comments on town meeting that you wanted to share with us, or any feedback, feel free to raise your hand. Okay.
I agree, Andrew. I think there's a lot of people who probably would like to come to town meeting that are just unable to. And in the process that we have, that's really unfortunate. And so I really would encourage us to try and find a solution, whether it is a weekend during the day where kids can have an activity, or if there's some way to allow remote voting of some sort. I don't know what that looks like, but it really, a lot of people, would like to come that can't, and that is a shame.
Remote's voting's tricky unless we went to a representative town meeting, which I think there was a town meeting committee in the past. Tim, were you on that?
It was, and
Yeah.
so was Claire, right? Claire, you were the chair, I believe.
She was.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, Mr. Semino, how are you?
Hey. First of all, before I talk about town meeting, I just want to give my thanks to everybody on the line here. You guys have a big job, an important job. I appreciate the effort that goes into it. A couple of points about town meeting in general. One is I've attended now dozens and dozens of town meetings, and there is always something that takes a lot of time that you never would guess. It's not unusual. It's not new. It's uncanny. I can't explain it. It's like, which article will bog us down for 45 minutes that should take 5 minutes? There's no telling. I've given up trying to read the tea leaves on that kind of thing. And then, as you say, Andrew, the NERI study went through and like nothing, and so I think that's just that's the nature of the beast. In terms of Saturday versus weekday, our bylaw requires it at annual town meeting be on a Saturday in March. That has been overridden, so to speak, for lack of a better word, recently because of COVID, including this year. Certainly last year we were outside for our town meetings. This year we're back inside, but we're at Algonquin where there's like double the space. When the town meeting date was set, for this year, we didn't really have a handle on what the COVID guidance would be. As it turns out, by the time we got to the date for town meeting this year, the COVID guidance was pretty liberal. We probably could have been inside at Trotter the way we usually are, but we were pushed out to a date in May because we just didn't know how it would fare to do it in March. I suspect, well, I don't suspect, I know that there's a discussion among the selectmen about having a fall town meeting, a special town meeting in the fall. I have every expectation that will be inside at Trotter, the way it used to be. And the way it always has been, you know, in my 20 plus years in town. In terms of getting people there who have difficulty, they have kids, whatever. I don't know the answer to that. And so the only thing I do say sometimes when I'm asked about it is this: the date for town meeting is always set well in advance. You don't always know if it's going to go to a second day or a second night, but at least the first day is set in time for people to plan plenty in advance. And I've got to do a better job educating the public about what we do at town meeting, why we have it, why it's important to attend. You know, at least one day a year, the first day of annual town meeting is very important to attend. And I think people have ample opportunity to plan to do that. But in terms of what else we can do in terms of kids, et cetera, my concern or question is whether we can occupy kids for an entire Saturday. For example, we get back to Saturday next spring, you know, we go from 10 in the morning till 6 at night. People better versed at those kind of things than me. Hopefully we'll be talking about that. Remote voting, not going to happen in my lifetime. There's just too much. There's a dramatic opportunity for fraud. And in fact, I'm not so keen on the clickers, except maybe in a limited application, even at a town meeting. You know, controlling what happens to those things when they get passed out. You know, somebody leaves the meeting early, hands theirs to somebody else. Hey, vote for me on this. You know, there are some control issues that I'm not completely convinced can be overcome in a way that will make everybody comfortable, especially me, frankly. So we'll see. I think maybe in a limited sense for votes that we would otherwise count with tellers, possibly, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Most votes are not close, and therefore you don't save any money by having electronic tabulation. And so I certainly would never support doing it for routine votes. I think part of the history and tradition and importance of town meeting is that we do come together as a town and talk through and vote on things. And the more it becomes a little sterile and more private, I think we lose the essence of what town meeting is supposed to be. So I have an open mind with regard to the clickers, but you know, I've talked to many moderators around the Commonwealth about it, and they're kind of evenly split. A lot of towns have done it, other towns have refused to do it, and you know, we'll see. We'll see. Anyway, I want to end where I started and just thank everybody whose face is on my screen. Did we not get my latest appointment sworn in time for tonight, Andrew?
Tim reached out to Howard. I guess he just hasn't gotten sworn in yet.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, I came on a couple of minutes late, so but I inferred, Andrew, that you were elected chair, and I saw that Marcy was elected vice chair and Eric secretary. So appreciate those efforts as well. I think that's it for me.
Great. Good to see you, Paul.
Yes.
Thank you,
Yes.
Paul.
At some point, you know, now that COVID is almost in the rearview mirror, I'll actually meet a couple of you in person.
And I don't see the legislature getting together and extending this remote meeting thing, although I do, I think it's better, but I think we're probably going to be back in person come July.
Right,
From July.
right.
Wow.
Excellent.
So get ready to be probably in the public safety building and have the radio come on mid-meeting and talk about what emergencies are going on around town.
By the way, the other thing about the date for town meeting, one more quick thing. The actual setting of the date, the day and the time, et cetera, is the purview of the selectmen. And so, I mean, I moderate the meeting, but I don't get to pick the date.
Yep.
Obviously, they consult with me to make sure I'm free. That's always helpful. But in terms of Saturday versus weekday and how we work within the governor's order, that's the selectmen's purview.
Paul, before you jump off, I just want to take a moment to I just want to take a moment to thank you for moderating that meeting, and everyone I've been to, I greatly appreciate your skills and your diplomacy, but also that you bring a little bit of fun to the table. So anyway, thank you for what you do. It's a lot, and there's a diverse group of folks in the audience who all have their own perspective. So anyway.
Yeah, well, you're very kind to say. It is a, you know, you kind of thread the needle every time, but it's a challenge, but it's one I think is important, you know, so that we do continue to be collegial as a town.
Yes, sir.
And Paul, I think, you know, I was thinking about after town meeting, the topic of what we are and aren't able to do in terms of raising the budget or you know, within that small you know, window or whatever the smidgen, I think. I think, you know, maybe we revise what goes into the, you know, the instruction sheet to maybe include some of that language or guidance for people to really understand, you know, what, you know, the law is pertaining to that and what we can and can't do. So I think there's a lot of a misconception on what we are allowed or not allowed to do. And you know, like I thought we could never raise it. And then Kathy and I talked to town council last year and he said, you could, but it has to be, you know, within a reason and just a little bit. You couldn't take your $50 million budget and add 50 million to it, right? That would be certainly beyond the scope, but you know, a couple 100,000, yeah, you could probably, as long as the moderator was okay, get away with that. But you know, I think a lot of people didn't understand that, including me and Kathy on advisory. So I think maybe we can review some, or you know, if we can look at what goes in there, some of that language might be helpful for people.
I review and revise my opening remarks every single meeting, and I'll do that, Andrew. It is, you know, the warrant that is published in advance of the meeting. The function of it, you know, for 200 and whatever years is to let people know what's going to be happening at the meeting. And if we deviate too far from it, then we've run afoul of, you know, sort of hiding the ball or bait and switch, and I have to be cognizant of that.
Yeah. You
know, to serve all the voters of town. But it's, you know, it's a fair point to make sure that people understand that, and I'll do that.
Yeah, but like, I mean, I think it's, you know, like, okay, here are the privilege motions. Here's the motions that you can do, and you know, things like that, and say, you know, it's within moderator's purview not to accept an indefinite proposed, you know, and to hear the pieces. So just kind of like, you know, explaining a little bit of that information that is within your power or within your purview, that kind of elaborates how town meeting gets run, that not everybody understands, and just might make it go a little smoother.
Yeah, it's fair enough.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, Paul.
And the last thing is, you know, I'm sure all you all know this, but the advisory committee exists as a creature of town meeting, right? You are formed and chartered to advise, obviously, town meeting voters on the articles in front of them. So in that regard, you have, you know, very broad purview to talk to whatever boards and committees you want to talk to get whatever information you feel like you need to get in order to make those, you know, give that advice, make those recommendations, et cetera. I mean, legally, can a board or committee not talk to advisory? Yeah, I suppose, but then I guess in that case, you wouldn't support whatever it is they were trying to do. So I think it's within all parties' best interests to work with advisory so that the best recommendation, you guys can make the best recommendations possible to town meeting. I will say that I know that town meeting appreciates a strong advisory committee. They rely on it. And it's important to me that you guys fill that role, and I think you do it well. So keep up the good work.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Cheers, guys. Have a good night.
All right, any last minute thoughts on town meeting before we get on to the next topic?
We finally approved the 18 grand for the rugs, right?
So which one?
Yeah, we did the carpet.
Yeah,
Carpet.
Yeah, the 18.
Yes, the DPW rugs. Yeah.
That was that moment where you're like, and I understand it was part of a bigger conversation, but that was a very to the point. Spent a
Yeah,
long
and
time on that.
I mean, that was been on our list to do every year I've been on advisory, and I think it's been on 3 or 4 years before then. They've been kind of kicking that one down the road a long time.
Yeah. Anyway.
But all right. So deep dive proposals for future summer meetings. Anybody have any ideas or topics they want to put on future agendas? And I'll send out a feeler before each summer meeting to see if anything pops up on anybody. Let me know if there's any items we can use the summertime to kind of cover the things that we haven't talked.
How big's the current list, Andrew?
Hold on a second. I had some of my own thoughts.
I know Kathy had a long list.
I'll have to get hers.
Yeah. So I think two of the things that should be on it, and probably are already on it, remain cybersecurity and HIPAA compliance.
Okay. List. Some of the other ones I had were kind of the stabilization fund conversation, and not so much. I'm thinking more along the lines of I'd be in favor of maybe a free cash one, not a huge one, but just something that you could use to say we target free cash is, a lot of places is like 5% of the overall budget. And you just kind of, if you're above that, you pocket that money away. And if you're below that, you start to release it a little bit, just so you don't have kind of those ebbs and flows of free cash. But just kind of having a policy that says we want free cash to be 5%, 6%, 7% of budget. And, kind of having some money to try to make sure we hit that target. That was one. And again, we didn't enumerate these on our agenda, so I'm just kind of throwing them out there as topics. And if we want to add or, I also think I'd like to maybe talk about increasing CPA to 3%, especially in light of those Algonquin fields that they're talking about, which is about a $6 million cost, which we could use. I think we could use CPA funds for. You can certainly use them for fields. I'm a little curious if they're physically in Northborough. And Tim, you were on CPC for a while. Do you think that would be an issue or not?
Which fields?
Algonquin.
I don't think. I can't say for certain, but on the surface of it, it doesn't sound like it's inbounds.
Okay. Yeah. But so that was one, just the CPA increase, doing a second review on maybe the revolving accounts, specifically rec. I know we had talked about to Tim and Jen Hansen about talking about that over the summer as opposed to right before 10 meeting. So that was on the agenda. One thing I wanted to do, I don't know if it's necessarily advisory or the select board, but I think having a calendar of grant deadlines and having people responsible. So, okay, this grant is due first week of June and it's for, DPW. Okay, somebody in the DPW should be either coming up with a grant for that or stating why we shouldn't be applying for it. But I think there's a lot of grants that I see come and go that we don't end up applying for. So that was one that I wanted to kind of pursue. I don't know if it's necessarily within our purview, but I don't see why we couldn't at least help put together a calendar and try to get the select board to push it forward.
Andrew?
Yep.
Sorry, can we go back to the fields at Algonquin?
Yep.
I guess I'm assuming you would only bring it up if you feel confident about this, but if it's for the, like, what's the funding mechanism if it's for the regional high school and it's, right, we're like voting to fund it, it's a capital item for the regional high school, right, that both towns have to approve?
Yeah, so they'd have to come to town meeting, and both Northborough and Southborough would have to approve the capital item, and it could be bonded. It gets really tricky because if Southborough declined it and Algonquin passed it, they can like appeal it, and then it's like a joint meeting. I don't quite understand that. We haven't never gone through that mechanism, but it gets a little tricky. But I don't think they would pass it through their usual allocation. It would come in through a separate capital article.
Okay. And then how far, because again, this is me being newer and frankly not having kids anywhere close to high school right now, so some of those things are a little off my radar. How far, I mean, they presented sort of where that plan was at, but does anybody here have a sense of like how far down that road it is? And like, are those like, is that plan of action, those fields essentially like, is that just like, that's the way we're moving, or is it, hey, we're getting ready to present that to the community? Like, and I guess I'm asking selfishly because like, I just started reading a ton of stuff about AstroTurf and not positive about AstroTurf. And I read that right after, like 2 days after I happened to hear the presentation at town meeting. I was like, oh, that's funny. And now I'm curious.
Yeah. And Tim, you might know more because you have kids at Algonquin, but I started digging into this a while ago when I was on Capitol, and I saw this on the plan for Algonquin, but it wasn't on our capital plan. And it's much more spoken about in Northborough meetings. Like they've done a presentation to Northborough's advisory committee or appropriation committee, I think it's called, and to their capital planning and to their select board. And they've already done the design, the actual, real design, not just the schematic design. So they're pretty far along. They have a whole committee on it. They came to town meeting and talked about it a little bit. They're starting to move the ball down the road. I think they're pushing a little bit harder in Northborough than they are here. So I think we're a little bit of an afterthought, but it sounds like it's pretty far along in terms of the scope and design and all that.
Oh, thanks.
Yep. But again, we still have to vote for it. They can't just go forward without us. But my thought is, we've talked about it, wanting to or thinking about increasing CPA to 3%, especially as the state seems to be doing more and more of a match. And just when I think everybody knows, but when you get to 3%, there's a second round of match. So you get even more than what we're currently getting on the 1%. But in order to get that passed or to have the conversation, you really need to have a large project that kind of warrants it. I thought that this, Algonquin Fields could be, that if it was applicable. You can, certainly they've used CPA funds to do fields at high schools, et cetera. My only question was whether or not it being a regional school district that's in a different town, whether or not you could use it or not, but we can look into that. But I still think having it at 3%, whether or not we can use it for this field, I think is always good. But in terms of town meeting vote or the ballot, I think it goes to the ballot too, doesn't it, Tim? I think having a field or a project that was large enough that kind of went hand in hand with it would be good.
Andrew,
ahead,
I had one item, which was maybe keeping it on our radar somewhere. I think there's too many things up in the air right now, but maybe not losing sight of having DPW back to once we know more about the St. Mark's project, because if the grant money has been spent and then we have to finish the park, kind of where is that money going to come from? And I realize there's select board, capital planning, public works planning board, other boards involved. So
Yeah.
I don't know there's anything to do right now, but just keeping that on our list so that we can try to help wherever we can.
Yeah, and I've been following the meet, whatever the park committee
St. Mark's
meeting, St. Mark's Street Park Working Group.
Working group.
And I think you have too, but it's certainly interesting to see. So I think they're almost back to the drawing board of assuming that that St. Mark's School doesn't find active burial grounds and all over the area, and we go forward with the park. That it sounds like people want to kind of rebuild it and revisit it, and might not look like what it does today, and who knows what that cost would be. So I'm kind of waiting a little bit for the dust to settle in terms of what are we building, and is there revised quotes, and kind of reassessing that situation, and will we have to give back money, not give back money? So there's a lot of permutations that need to happen, I think, but I certainly agree with you. Especially I haven't seen much work being done over there or on the other projects in town. Main Street still hasn't been done in downtown, so I'm kind of curious to see like when the next phase is going to happen, or if the select board's going to put a hiatus on the next phase to kind of keep track of the next spend.
Yeah, that's all I had. Thank you.
The one other one I had is maybe have advisory and select board work on a letter to our representatives talking about town priorities. I saw Northborough did something similar, talking about circuit breaker, regional transportation, et cetera. So I think there's some things that are happening in the state that would be nice for advisory to weigh in, that these are important to us. Maybe the MSBA dollar per square foot increase, CPA match, some of the other, passing the 25% tax for pilot or nonprofits. So there's certainly some legislation that's going through that I think advisory and maybe the select board could write a joint letter to our representatives. And there's a new one I believe that we're going to have for the new district. So and whenever we get to that point where they're getting to be in session, putting together some kind of prioritization letter to them. Any other topics that people might have?
This is pretty minor, and it may just be more kicking it back to other folks who should be stewarding this. But I remember the conversation coming up briefly with, and I'm forgetting which budget it is. I can go back to my notes, but the cost associated with all the, I'm just going to call it direct mailing, bills, notices, everything they send out. Like, we could look at it and say it's a relatively small line item, but it adds up, and it sort of goes against the fact that we're trying to be a green community. So I feel like we briefly discussed it, and everyone was like, oh yeah, including the folks from the budget we were reviewing, like, yeah, some people still like their direct mail. Yeah, it's something we should talk about, but it didn't seem like it seemed like it was a one and done, not going to go anywhere. I'd like to see it go somewhere, and maybe that's just prodding somebody else to say, have you guys thought about that? Maybe it's, I was looking at, have other towns looked at that and had people opt into paperless, but I get too much crap in the mail and I don't want to pay for it. And I'd like my kids to have an environment to grow up in. So that'll be my soapbox for a quick second.
Yeah, I think that's certainly worth looking into. I think it's certain things legally they might need to send out a statement, but I think some things you could probably opt into. Takes care of upcoming schedule. So let's see. So if I think the next meeting that I had that we should have in terms of timing wise is the one on July 13th to approve the interdepartmental transfers and any reserve funds that are needed, but certainly we should meet between now and then. Does everybody think so? If we meet on the 8th, so I was thinking if we meet twice in between then, I kind of every 2 weeks. Does that sound good, or do people want to meet more often? But I think every 2 weeks at this time of year is probably good. Does the 8th work for everybody? So maybe the 8th and the 22nd, and then we'll skip the 6th because it's July 4th and then go to the next week. Okay.
Yeah, that looks good.
All right, I'll send out some meeting invites for that, so we have it on our calendar. And if anything comes up, we can certainly, and I think, kind of we'll try to touch on some of these larger topics in those meetings. So then we'll probably try to, like Tim, I think, HIPAA or cybersecurity, maybe we can, we'll try to do something offline and collect what information we need on that, or how do we move that forward, have, MTC or JN, so that we can go through some of that stuff. We'll kind of tee it up for those meetings and have it be more of a good discussion point conversation. Okay. Any other business properly brought forth? Does anybody have anything else from a members notice?
I'll tell you that the ARPA committee has effectively completed their charge, and the board has not yet been canceled, dissolved, in the event that the select board requires something. But I imagine it will be dissolved in the near future.
Yeah, and Tim, kudos to you and that committee and Andrea and all the work you guys did. I think you had the record for the most amount of meetings in the shortest period of time that I've ever seen. So I don't know if you knew what you were getting into when you signed up for that, but great work there.
It was, the board members did a wonderful job.
Yep. And I think the final report and the things that you put forth, I think, to me, I think it is a great list, and it gives a good breadth of different areas of the population, different demographics and strategic goals, short-term goals, and I think it was good. Okay. Any other business? All right. Public comment. Anybody from the public? Okay, seeing none. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Andrew, did you want to approve the minutes from the 20th?
No, sorry, we did that just before you joined.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and unless you had any edits.
No, I don't have any edits, and I was only there for a portion of that meeting anyway.
That was great work by Claire. There was no edits around the board. We just approved it real quick, and we figured we did that while we were waiting for everybody else.
Perfect.
All right.
That's too kind.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Roll call vote. Adam.
Aye.
Marcy.
Hi.
Tim.
Aye.
Eric.
Hi.
And Andrew is aye. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Short and sweet. I like it.
I know.